Well, if you would open your Bibles, Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, chapter 30, verse 20 and 21. You'll notice there these words. And though the Lord gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction. I want you to notice that. This didn't say the devil, it says the Lord gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction. Now, it's one thing if the devil brings adversity to you, we have the authority to rebuke him. But what do you do when God serves you the bread of adversity? I know some folks who are in this place today, you got like a PhD from the University of Adversity. And sometimes the Lord will serve you the bread of adversity and then you wash it down with the water of affliction. It is to say that not every road is going to be an easy road. That there are some periods in your life where you deal with adversity and affliction. When you're on a journey, there are hills and mountains and valleys, ups and downs that you have to deal with. And though the Lord gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, notice what he says, yet your teachers will not be moved into a corner anymore. In other words, you've gone through stuff in the past and you didn't learn, but he says this time your teacher is going to step up. You're going to learn this time. Because pain will not leave your life until it teaches you what you need to know. If you don't learn your lesson in one place, you're going to learn it in another place. It may be a different place and a different face, but it's the same lesson. And you're going to experience that. But he says, yet your teachers will not be moved into a corner anymore, but your eyes shall see your teachers. And then notice here, he says, your ears shall hear a word behind you. Say behind. Your ears are going to hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. Whenever you turn to the right hand or whenever you turn to the left. And I want to talk to you today from the subject, the voice that matters. The voice that matters. Not every voice matters in your life. And you will discover that everybody has the right to speak, but you must earn the right to be heard. Just because people have a voice doesn't mean you have to listen to them. And you shouldn't listen to everything that everybody has to say. If you did, your mind would be so twisted, so discombobulated by the varying opinions of human beings about what you should do, when you should do it, how you should do it, why you should do it. You can't listen to every voice. So you have to be selective in the voices that you listen to. But just remember that everything in the kingdom of God begins and ends with a call of God's voice into our life. When God gets ready to call a person from the world, living in the world, to coming into the kingdom, you are called out of darkness into his marvelous light. Everything begins with a call. When you're on one level of life and God intends for you to start living life on another level, you're called up. You have to be called. There's a call that says, come up hither. We're called up. We're called up. There's always a call. And the last call that we'll ever get is a call to come home. But all of life begins with a call, we transition through a call, and we finish this thing with a call to come home. So God's kingdom is built upon his voice calling us in the various walks of life. And it is not a static journey. This journey is a journey that has hurdles and curves. Hurdles and curves. And you have to listen to the voice because we walk by faith and not by sight. See, this is not a sight thing. You don't need sight when you can go by the voice. You know, my friend Pastor Mark Ramsey from Australia, and he was there at a skiing place, and he saw that the pastor and the youth pastor were there, and they were making fun of somebody below them. He was trying to throw the guy off because they saw a guy training a guy to ski. And so that the teacher who was out front was saying left, left, right, right, left, left, right. So this guy, as he was going up the ski lift, he's going to try to confuse the student who was learning. And he starts calling out the opposite commands, right, left, right. So when the teacher would say left, then the boys would say right. You know, the youth pastors are just clowning around. And then when they got to the bottom of the hill and they were coming back up, he saw these same two people. And he noticed the guy who was behind had a patch on his back. It said blind skier. He felt about this small. But he didn't throw the blind skier off, because the blind skier's ear was tuned to only respond to the voice of his teacher. And this is why we have to be blind to certain things and deaf to certain other voices, so that we don't get it twisted, because God's trying to lead us as his people. I said that when I was in Israel once and I saw these two shepherds who had their flock of sheep with them, and they were going in opposite directions, and then when they actually met each other, I saw all of the sheep just gather, and I was wondering, how does this man know his sheep from the other man's sheep? But the shepherd was making a particular noise. And see, Scripture says, my sheep know my voice, and a stranger they will not follow. So the shepherds just kept walking in their opposite directions, and all of a sudden these sheep who were in a pool together, mixed all up together, just began to break away, and each one began to follow their respective shepherds because they recognized their voice. They recognized their voice. We have to be just sensitive to God like that, to where we are in a place where we recognize the voice that matters. Because when God has you on a journey, there's going to be a voice that's going to try to distract you, to call you from your assignment, to bring confusion in your life. You know, when God writes an epic in your life, there has to be a protagonist and an antagonist. It's what makes the story interesting. And the great drama for the Christian is to see how we prevail over the antagonist who is sent to try to lead our life in a wrong direction. And God is pulling for us, the devil is rooting against us, and sends decoys to throw us off track. And that's why it is so important for us to listen to the voice, for we walk by faith and not by sight. And remember, faith comes by hearing, being able to hear the Master's voice, being able to hear the voice that matters. You always get confused when you start listening to too many voices. That's why, you know, it's bad luck to have too many cooks in the kitchen, because everybody does it differently, and everybody has a theory and an idea, and so it confuses the process when you have all chiefs and no Indians, because there are too many voices, and you can't just follow a whole bunch of voices. But conversation is the seed of understanding. Conversation is the seed of understanding. It bothers me when I see older people that become antagonized against younger people, and younger people looking at older folks like they're the enemy. But you know, we have to stop looking at young folks like they are the problem, like they're a problem to be solved, but they are a people to be understood and a people to be loved. And when we look at them in that way, to where we will listen so that we can understand, because conversation is the seed of understanding. Again, it's about being able to hear the voice. About being able to hear the voice. And so it's interesting that he talks about our being able to hear this voice behind us. Now, if you're hearing a voice behind us, if it's God and you're hearing the voice behind you, does that not suggest to us that we have our backs turned to God? But we're hearing a voice behind us saying, this is the way. And he's really trying to lead us. And I believe that this is really what it has reference to when he says, I hear a voice behind us. Behind us simply means that it's something in your past. It's in your past. Because how many of you realize that oftentimes we started off right on the right foundation, and then you get up and you start meeting people and going places, and you get thrown off track of what you originally believed? That's why it's a voice from behind. I heard a voice behind me saying, this is the way. That means that where we were currently walking, we've lost our way. And we need to go back to the voice that is behind us. Here's our greater need here. The greater need for us today is not to be instructed as much as it is to be reminded. Paul would write and said, I stir you up by way of remembrance, or I put you in remembrance of this particular thing, because we have a greater need to be reminded than to be instructed. It's not that we need something new all of the time. We need just something that keeps us focused on what God told us to do. It's about making a decision one time and maintaining that decision every single day. And we get thrown off and distracted by other voices that are trying to lead us in ways that are unfruitful to the productivity of fulfilling what God has established in our life. He says, I heard a voice from behind me. You know what that says to us? That the past is not dead. We carry the past with us. We are the sum of all that we have experienced. So we carry the past with us. And it may be something that your grandmother said, your grandfather said. It could be something that a preacher said, that a teacher said, that a coach said, that a boss said. It could be something that a best friend said to you in the past. And have you ever been in a situation where you had words that somebody spoke to you in some previous time that came back and haunted you? And you could hear their words coming back saying, you know, Mama used to always say, Grandma used to always say, so-and-so used to always say, and their words are guiding you saying, this is the way. You remember Ray Charles, his mama told him, don't let nobody, make you no slave. I mean, she'd tell him certain things that just he carried in his mind. Don't you be a slave to anything, drugs, anything. I don't care what it is. And this voice would come back even when he was off track. And this voice from behind would say, this is the way, walk in it. This is the way, walk in it. That's why mothers and fathers, listen, don't ever get weary of speaking truth to your children. I know it may look like they are crazy and like they're not paying attention to you, but something is going down into their subconscious even when they can't see it and understand it. When they'll be off track down the road, they will hear your voice crying through the vista of time saying, this is the way, walk in it. This is the way, walk in it. This is the way, walk in it. I'm so glad for the voices that we have. And my question to you is, whose voice do you trust and respect? Whose voice do you trust and respect? Because here's the issue. The voice that you respect and trust determines the direction that your life will take. The voice that you respect and trust will determine the direction that your life will take. You know, remember Eve when she was in the Garden of Eden and she listened to the voice of the serpent? At this time, the serpent walked upright and he could talk. And she listened. She had a conversation with the enemy. She was talking with a serpent. Based on a conversation that she had, she listened to the wrong voice. The question is, whose voice do you respect and trust? Because if you respect and trust that voice, it's going to determine the direction that your life will take. Because Eve respected and trusted the voice of the enemy, it determine the direction that her life would take. You see, what you say always depends on what you've heard. Whatever you say depends on what you've heard. That's why Isaiah said, woe is me, for I'm undone. I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. He says, my lips are unclean. I've been saying stuff that I didn't need to say because I dwell around cussing folks. And when you live around cussing folks, guess what you do? You cuss. We live in a day now, a time, we got more cussing saints that I've ever seen. All of the days of my life just cussing saints, cussing saints. Listen, you need to upgrade your vocabulary. Come up with some better words. I'm just telling you, there are better alternatives. You know, the reason the bishop does not use profanity, because I've got some advanced vocabulary words that I can use whenever I'm frustrated. And so I don't have a need to use profanity because I've got some other vocabulary words to be able to express, how I feel. Words express thoughts. Words express feelings. Words express ideas. And so you have to, the better command of words you have, the better you can express your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings. when you speak the right kinds of words, when you develop that in your vocabulary. But what you say depends on what you've heard. The only reason that we speak the way that we speak is because of what we have listened to in the atmosphere around us. You have the kind of accent that you have because the people around you have that accent. They have that accent in the home where you grew up, and that's why we end up sounding like the people that we are around. Those accents can change. You can get up and go off to school, and then all of a sudden your child is talking like somebody like, where did you learn that? Well, I promise you, they've been hearing a different sound, a different accent, and they start imitating the sound. And you see, it's difficult to replicate a sound of something that you've never heard before. That's why many of the African dialects, they don't have the letters TH that come together in it. So when they do have a word that we have in English that has the TH, they have a problem saying it. They can't say thank, they say tank. They don't say thousand, it's thousand. I thank God for $1,000. And the reason that they have a problem saying it is because they don't have the sound in their language. Just like in the English language, we don't have the double R where we roll our R like the Spanish language has. So a lot of people have a problem saying gracias because there's a slight roll of the R, so they get gracias. And they can't say it because they haven't been used to hearing it. But when you grow up hearing it, if you are hearing the rolling of the R, rojo, carro, perro, if you grow up hearing it, you can imitate it because you've heard it. But it's impossible to say something that you haven't heard. It's hard to say things that you haven't heard. That's why if a person does not have the ability to hear, it impedes the ability to speak. Because if you can't hear it, it's very difficult to say it. Very difficult to say it. Now, my point to you is this. What do the voices that you listen to have you thinking? What do the voices that you listen to have you thinking? Every voice is going to have you thinking about something. You know, what you think about is based on a voice that you've heard. What do the voices that you listen to have you believing? What do they have you believing? The voices that you listen to, what do they have you believing? What do they have you saying? What is the voice that you listen to? What does that voice have you saying? The voices that are around you, what do those voices have you saying? You just think about if you're around a certain kind of speech, that's what it'll have you saying. And then what do the voices that are around you have you feeling? You'd be surprised how people can feel a certain way about you, and it's because of a voice that told them. There have been people that have made wrong estimations of who I am. Just because when I'm away from people, I'm a quiet person. And so they'll assume that because I'm quiet and I might be in profound thought, they say, he's stuck up. And people will misjudge you because they don't know you. And a voice was in their head will tell you, oh, so-and-so, he's not speaking to you because he's stuck up. Oh, he think he's too good, so he can wait for you. No, that's just not my personality. If you don't know the person, you can listen to a voice in your head saying, oh, she's stuck up. She thinks she's better than everybody. And people are making judgments about you because a voice on the inside of them, or because somebody heard that you were stuck up because they were around you and you didn't say anything to them. And some people are just shy in their personality. They only talk to people that they know. And they were taught from a child, you don't talk to strangers. And then there are other people that don't ever meet a stranger. And so you meet a gregarious person, and then they're looking at you and they don't understand you. So a voice in their head tells you that you think that you're better. Anybody know what I'm talking about? You've ever been misunderstood by people because they had a voice in them telling them that you were a particular way, and that's not who you were or how you were at all? So how do the voices that you listen to, how do they have you thinking? How do they have you believing? What do they have you doing? What do they have you saying? How do they have you feeling? And here's another question to ask about those voices. Do the voices that you listen to empower you? Do the voices that you listen to, do they empower you? Do the voices that you listen to, do they empower you? Do they encourage you? Do they strengthen something in you? Do they confirm you in your destiny and your purpose that God has assigned from your life? Do those voices empower you? Then ask yourself this question. Do the voices that I listen to, do they distract you? Do they distract you? Are they serving as a distraction in your life? Is it where the devil is distracting like he distracted Eve in the garden? And even I believe that a part of the curse that came on the serpent was not only that he would have to crawl around on his belly, because remember, prior to that, he was an upright creature and he had the ability to talk. I believe that when God cursed the serpent, that he cursed him to have to crawl around on his belly, and he also took away his voice. So the serpent is a voiceless thing. And isn't it amazing that even with no voice, that he's just left with a hiss, and so he's still hollering at sister, psst. Psst. You'd be surprised. He can't even talk, psst. Just looking at you and communicating with the eye, psst. Let me holler at you. That's what he's saying in his eyes. Psst. Let me holler at you. So do the voices that you listen to, do they distract you? Are they distracting you from your purpose? Or does a voice empower you? Is it encouraging you? Is it strengthening you to be more of what God has called you to be? Or does it distract you? Here's the third thing. Do the voices that you listen to, does it paralyze you? Paralyze you? Does it paralyze you? Because the voice can speak fear to you to say, don't let anybody read your portrait because it's stupid. Don't let anybody see your plans because they're stupid. Don't let anybody listen to your song because it sounds ridiculous. And they paralyze you in fear because they make you afraid that if I attempt to do this in front of people, then they're going to laugh at me, they're going to criticize me, they're going to make fun of me. Then that voice of fear paralyzes. You want to be with voices that empower you to be who God has called you to be. Not those voices that serve to distract you and to paralyze you in your God call and purpose. You have to ask yourself, what are the voices that I'm listening to? What are the dreams that are in your heart? What has God spoken to you? And are you around people who help to nurture the vision that God has placed on the inside of you? What is your gift, your ability, your area of domain that God has assigned to you in your life? Are you around people who know you well enough to be able to empower you and encourage you in your dream and your vision of what God has designed for your life? Or are you distracted by them to where you're on your assignment and you let somebody else impose their assignment that takes precedence over your assignment? Be careful about the voices that you listen to and trust and respect in your life, because God is going to hold you responsible for what God told you to do. And if you let somebody else take their slack and impose it on your life as to what you're doing, you know, so much of your stress in your life comes from saying yes when you ought to say no. You got to learn when to say no. You're afraid to offend somebody, but you got to stay on task, because some well-meaning people can distract you from the assignment that God told you to do, and you'll be so busy serving their purpose that you neglect your purpose. And then when you have to give an account before God, God is going to say, what did you do about what I told you to do? How have you measured up in the assignment that I have given to you? And then you said, what, Lord? The man that thou gavest me, the woman that thou gavest me, the serpent. And you start blaming him. And listen, God doesn't play those games. He doesn't play those games. God says, all right, you want to play that with me? Serpent, I got a punishment for you. Woman, I got a penalty for you. Man, I got a penalty for you. God dealt with all of them. Nobody got off the hook. Nobody. God doesn't play. God says, don't play that pass the buck game with me. Says you're going to accept responsibility for what you've done. There's a penalty for this thing. I'm going to deal with you. So when God has given you an assignment, listen, you have a responsibility before God. You better remember that I don't have time to get distracted and paralyzed in my purpose. I need to be around voices that know how to nurture the call of God that is in my life, how to empower me, to encourage me to be what God has called me to be and to do what God has called me to do. You need to be around people that believe and understand your calling and understand that. If you're with the wrong crowd, go to where your crowd is. Go to somebody that encourages your voice, that liberates you to be who God has called you to be. You have to understand that there are certain voices that confirm and affirm who you are and who you need to be, and you need to stay with those voices, because if you get with the wrong voice, it gets you distracted or paralyzed. Don't stay in an atmosphere where you keep getting distracted.
Thank you for watching Power for Living with Bishop Dale C. Bronner. Join us again next time for Power for Living, where revelation is power. Power for living.